Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome to Perspectives. It is Monday, the 29th of March, 2021, as we begin what we term in the Christian community as Holy Week. It's Holy Week for everyone, but whatever you subscribe to, may you have a really, really good one, of course, as we lead up to the feast of Easter. Trust everyone had a really, really good weekend. It's kind of crisp on the outside this morning, and I know vacation time begin for those of you who still have in-person classes, so that's good. Easter time is normally a time to kind of catch up with schoolwork. You only get a break really for the holidays. So happy holidays to those of you who are on holidays from today, and welcome everyone across all platforms who are joining us. The broadcasters bringing this to you. MTV on air, our Perspectives page, TNR Communications, Mikey Live, good morning to you. Those of you on Partygrenada and Sister Isle Radio. I'm your moderator, Brenda Baptiste, and it's time to introduce our expert talk panel, our Senator Christopher Allie and Mr. Byron Campbell. Good morning.
Good morning, Brenda. Just from that introduction, I know you had a good weekend.
My weekend was exactly the way I like it, and don't ask anything else.
No, I ain't asking a question, not one question. Good morning to all our viewers and listeners. It's a pleasure to be here as usual.
Good. How was your weekend?
Well, quiet. I did my usual thing, but my blood pressure rose on Sunday when I did my walk on Grenada Beach and saw all the garbage that we leave towards the ending of the beach, and all the fast food boxes and bottles and cups strewn. I mean, it's really disgusting to see how we treat our treasures like Grenada Beach. And the irony of it to me, when they come to the beach to enjoy the beach, at that section of the beach, there's no garbage. The place is nice and clean, but then they just leave all this stuff there.
Yeah.
And I'm certain they wouldn't come back there again in the garbage-infested area. And I mean, sometimes when these things happen and the authorities decide to take drastic action, they complain and they say that we're draconian and we this and we that, but our people are really disciplined and ridiculous with the garbage issue. I mean, I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. It really does bother me when I see these things. That was not a good part of the weekend for me.
No, at all. I mean, it's such a beautiful space.
Yeah.
And people often say things like, well, if I only nothing to clean.
Yeah.
I find that it's just the most selfish and vile thing.
I don't know what that is. And throwing stuff out of a vehicle for people to clean. And I mean, I just don't know what that is. And but the other good thing, I must compliment the government for some of the roadworks I see they're doing.
Yeah.
I am a person that traverses Marian Road and some other areas, and they have already done some work, some extra work. You see them working on the weekends, on the Sundays, to try and patch the potholes or do some paving here and there, and that's a really good thing, because I know a lot of people have been complaining, and the asphalt plan been down for a while. It seems to be back up now, so I want to compliment them. I see they're doing some road works, and I mean, in difficult times, I mean, the finances is not as it used to be, as we all know, because of recovery under COVID and so on. That's a good initiative, and I mean, kudos to them for giving the extra effort. And we must say things and give government a little praise every now and then. I know we're quick to criticize, but when they're doing something good, we must say it. And I mean, I just want to say that the Ministry of Works that coordinating the road works, I think they're doing a good job, and kudos to them, and keep it up.
Yeah. On the weekend, I swung away from one of my favorite holes, and then I realized, it's no longer there.
That's the point. That's the point.
So yeah. Mr. Campbell, how was your weekend?
It was a farming weekend. Of course, the weather continues to be mild in terms of for a dry season. So again, farmers, we are very pleased with that. Excellent conditions. But Chris, you have to keep talking about the pollution issue on the beach. There's no stopping this. But I want to go back on a few things. Firstly, the vaccination update. I think that what I'm hearing that we have over 9,500 thereabout.
10 somebody. We
It's
just
gone
got
up to
to
10,000?
We just got to 10.
Okay, but what the minister indicated is that this average is about 1,800 per week, and he says at that rate you need about, to do 60% if you can reach an immunity, you need about 9 months, and that's unacceptable. So other islands seems to be doing better than us, like Antigua 25,000 for example, Barbados 61, St. Lucia 21. So we have a way to go. But what I noticed,
close to 70 now, I think I saw that in a nation.
Okay, but what I noticed is that the level of negatives, the level of fake and other information out there is very bold now, and it's everywhere. So I think it become very, very harder now to convince people and to create that confidence that we need. So I'm not sure what the strategy is, but I would say it doesn't look very good for us at all, reaching any kind of herd immunity. What was very topical in the week also was the situation regarding UWI. And of course, UWI is responsible for we say human capital in the region. It's a very important institution, and they face some issues regarding financing in particular, and just organizational general. But financing is a key, and how they reset this and how it's reorganized, because it's a critical and very important institution for the region.
Absolutely.
Certainly not only Grenada. But I wanted to focus a bit, colleagues, on the CARICOM Commission report on marijuana, because there was a roundtable in Grenada sponsored by the NGOs, the Interagency Group of Development Organizations, and the Grenada Conference of Churches, and they released their report because they made it very clear this was to have our local community more informed about the report, which, and I just want to point out in Grenada's particularly what the report revealed about Grenada, that there was majority support for decriminalization, and some 61% of the poll conducted in 2018 showed support for it, and breaking the whole cycle of negative impact and the marijuana and Rastafarianisms and so forth. So I think what we learned here is that the report came across very positively, and the next stage now is whether there's more consultation or the ball is now in the government court to proceed, whether the next stage will be a draft legislation. Dealing first, I believe, with the issue of decriminalization, started with this. But what to focus on is how the education and protection of children. I think this came across very, very, very strong and forcefully that in going forward and using marijuana is a drug and using it in public spaces and so on. But I think one aspect that came out there was that the WHO declassified marijuana as a dangerous drug, which was, I thought, very, very revealing coming forward. But so these are some of the issues that came that pop up during the week and over the weekend. I think that more discussion, more information on that could be useful.
I saw communication that indicates that we are about to start in earnest the discussions about the decriminalization of marijuana from a policy standpoint. And, I saw that. So that's about to happen. Regarding vaccinations, it's becoming concerning. To be honest, I was more optimistic and hopeful before, but it is becoming very, very concerning where our numbers are at. And when you look at our neighbors, and at this point in the game, the kind of conversation we are having about where we're at. And I think what will be very, very useful, you mentioned lots of the negatives that are out there, but as many negatives as there are cases to show that this, and then the most viable case is that we are living this thing. Yes, a lot of people we didn't see people falling down and dying in Grenada. We never heard the hospital was overwhelmed at any time. But here we are living in a space where we've lost people, Grenadians in the United Kingdom, in the US, everywhere. And maybe the conversation needs to change. So those who are encumbered with guiding policy have to start to recraft and retool how we meet people where they are and have these discussions. I always find talking with people help. So things like town halls, they really, really help. I know it's COVID time, so in-person meetings are tough, but we can try some of those. We could even have big sessions here at the National Stadium. Just have people talk. Young people, we need to be sort of a little careful, because how you communicate. So for instance, a lot of our, let's say, our prime ministers of a particular age, we have certain ministers are a particular age, and we have younger. Across the spectrum, I must say, we have parliamentarians. So we need to start targeting messages. So if I was speaking to a guy last week, and he made such a great point. He says when he listens, what he gets is, Well, let me tell you something, you know. He feel like he mother. He say he used to get a lot of licks because he was a bad boy. That's his words, right? Yeah. And he say he does get a feeling sometimes when he listen to press conferences and thing, man, about the vaccine. That listen, man, if you ain't wash up the wells, you ain't going outside. Right? And that is important because you might say it's consequential or whatever in terms of behavior, but that is important because it means the message is being lost on him. Because he's coming from a point of view, so if I wash the ways, I won't go outside, or watch me to wash the ways, you know? So we have to find a way to communicate. We have a lot of young leaders, we have artists, we have young senators, we have young politicians, we have student movements. We really need to, because, and I say this because the young population is so vast. Yeah. And so we have to find a way to start crafting the communication for the various demographics of people. That is how scientific I believe we need to get now. It's not okay to just put out a carte blanche message to everybody, just this generic message that you think is going to meet everyone. That will not happen. I mean, even in marketing and advertising, we know that. So we really have to sit down and retool and let us try to meet our people. I noticed the Ministry of Health had a conversation with youth. I missed it yesterday, but I want to go back and look at it. I saw people like Vaughn, and so we're going to be on there. Great. One of the doctors who's one of their talking heads, Dr. Charles, she is young. So, you know, that kind of, you use people, you know, you're not dissing the earth, but you need to reach that demographic because they feel they're infallible. Number one. And number two, they want to have carnival, they want to party, they want to do everything, but they're saying, I ain't getting no vaccine. No, the vaccine hinges on all these things. So we have to find a way, Senator Allie.
Yeah, I was just going to add to say that I certainly agree with what you're saying. And when you look at what's happening in the US now with the third wave and in Europe, it's among young people. Mm-hmm. And the young people who seem to believe that their youth will protect them to some degree and not bother with the vaccination. But I also want to add that generally I find that people have a penchant for taking up fake news or negative news more than positive. And I agree with you that we need to structure it probably more pointed and take people who have taken the vaccine and have a good experience and say, listen, man, this thing I can take and we can do, so that is not a problem. And, you know, run with it from there. And I certainly do believe that we have to pull up things quicker. I want to quickly touch on Byron's report on the decriminalization of marijuana and say that one of the things that came out of the report that stood out to me, Byron, was the young age at which we started smoking marijuana in our country. There was a young, between 16 and 17 and 24. That's right. There were a lot of young people engaging, and you know what they talk about the drug and the development of your brain and how it can hinder that when you start too early. Yeah. And that is one of the things that I thought stood out of the report to me when I looked at it as well. So there are things there that I know the consultations are going to start, and then they go to cabinet, and that's a process, and then they release some kind of draft on it. So that is something that is going to need a lot more discussions as we go forward as well. But I also want to touch on the thing with fake news that you brought up, and I heard that there have been a fake news thing circulating about curfew over the weekend, and
that's annoying.
And all kind of
annoying.
Yeah, and again, that's just an indication of. You know, we take these things from, I'm told that this fake news thing about the curfew came from Jamaica, and we just modify it to suit and say Grenada into this thing, and nobody takes the time to check and see the validity. And that's the same thing that's going on with the vaccine. You know, people from all walks of life who had no qualifications about nothing, put out a thing about vaccine or why they shouldn't take it, and we just listen to these things. And we don't give it no sense of checking and say, but wait now. Is this coming from somebody who is a serious? And then there are people who portray themselves as virologists and all kind of thing and so on, and you wonder what kind of ologists they are, you know. So
it's dangerous.
One of the pandemics. I mean, the pandemic within the pandemic is the amount of ologists we have.
And, you know, I always say the greatest impact of Donald Trump was fake news. To me, that he introduced this concept that no news stream and media must be taken seriously, and you could test everything and say they're fake.
It is really sad.
And that has turned all of us, I mean,
dangerous because
BBC, the normal things, the normal news media, yes, all of them may have their bias to some degree, but no, we challenge every legitimate business news media that we know, whether it's the BBC, whether it's the CNN, whatever.
Yeah.
And that he just turned everything upside down, and people listen to these things.
That's really sad because I think, and that's the thing, as much as there's fake, the work is going to be hard in terms of making sure that the messages that should get out, get out. One of the most brilliant things I saw a news media outlet did in this period here in Grenada was Power FM. Power FM, the nurses went to the station to vaccinate the team, you know, and that is the kind of power, pun intended, that you give to a message. Instead of you just on your, just there putting out all these, because the media should be in the campaign to sensitize the nation. So they went live on Facebook, I guess they're on radio as well. The nurse was there, the team got registered. I mean, known personalities, people saw them getting vaccinated. That was just so powerful. And regarding, and just to digress now, because you praise and then you knock. I'm taking back the praise, but it's important. People on the air need to be careful. That curfew thing, so many on-air people, and I'm not going to say broadcasters, because these days people just on air, right? If a dog could talk, it would be on air soon. Many on-air people were just all weekend long. Oh, curfew coming. Hey, look out for the lockdown Easter.
Yeah.
Where did you get that information? And even if you're on air and you are privy to information, because Grenada is small. Yeah. Everybody had to whisper to somebody. Yeah. So even if you are aware, one of the things that you're taught is you hold it's not your story to tell. You hold it until your broadcasting house says go. When you go, anything then, they told you to go, right? So you don't just release things. Even if you're here, no, it's not your soapbox. You just don't keep doing that. And everywhere, every station I turn, the DJs, everybody, oh, I smell a coffee. You come in, boy, a coffee. Yeah, here we go. No, just riling people up. Where did it come from? It is so untrue.
Yeah, well,
it is so untrue.
The technology we have now in the world, unfortunately, that is one of the disadvantages. We could now post live on Facebook. I used to always say years ago, if there was an accident somewhere, the first inclination of people coming was to come and try and assist and see how we could help if there's any person's damage, what's going on with the wreck. Now the first thing we do is pull out the phone and film and post.
Yes.
It's a different construct.
It's a different world.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I hear you about the broadcasters, but generally we do that as individuals without thinking about any consequence.
No, but depends on
what we put it.
Depends on where you sit. Yeah. You have to leave your behavior behind.
Yeah. So it's a real issue that we have now. But
I think if we just to borrow from Carly Buds, he's a reggae singer. If we don't post things and we like to post, try and post a little more love. Yeah. Let's try that.
Agreed.
If you're gonna post anything, post a little more love on this Monday morning. It is Perspectives on a Monday, and of course this morning we are talking public service, labor relations, all of these things, and we have a very, 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 very versed and in tuned individual to do that with us, Ambassador Claris Charles. But we take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Get vaxxed. It's your best shot. Hello.
A message from the Ministry of Health.
Don't wear your mask today. You see everywhere you go. There are rules you got to follow, so don't you say COVID-19 will delay. Take the opportunity to save your community. Don't be that guy, put a mask on your face if you're heading outside. It's your life, my life, more lives will be taken if we don't try. If you feel any symptoms, call the hotline. Stay inside until you feel fine. 6 feet away every day. Keep COVID-19 far from away. Keep Grenada safe. Be COVID-19 smart.
Hello Grenada, this is Jerry Alexis, Technical Director at the Grenada Football Association. I have been vaccinated. As we are the association about to roll football out again on the field, I encourage every player to get vaccinated so that we can quickly, speedily get back on the field doing what we love.
Dreaming of taking a break and escaping to an idyllic, happy place? Well, finding it does not require you to go too far. You already live in paradise. All it takes is for you to go out and discover it. Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique are blessed with a wide variety of accommodation that satisfy any taste and budget. Find the one that suits you and your family and treat yourself while having peace of mind that your health and safety is a priority. Knowing that we have gorgeous waterfalls, stunning beaches, and flavorful cuisine, let's be tourists in our own islands and enjoy paradise at home.
Welcome back to Perspectives, and if you're just joining us, welcome to the broadcast on this Monday morning. And here with us this morning, we're having a discussion. Of course, very topical now is the industrial impasse with the public workers, teachers included, regarding a 4% increase. So that is very topical. But how does the public service work? What happens? What categories of workers do we have? What's the history of that? What is the institutional knowledge regarding, how it operates vis-a-vis the private sector, so on and so forth, and how critical the role that industrial relations plays, that is, of the union and organized labor for the workers in the public service. So we have a very special lady with us this morning. She is, of course, a great Grenadian daughter from the parish of St. John, because she dabbled in politics for a while, but I think she really likes to be known as a teacher. Yeah, she teaches at all levels, even children she didn't birth. And then some. She's now our ambassador to the Republic of Cuba. We say good morning to Ambassador Claris Charles. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I'm here as an honest Grenadian who wants to continue to help wherever I can as long as I live.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's also there's also another word for that, patriot.
Well,
yeah, and the fact that she woke up and looked in the mirror today and she said, what could I do for my country?
Yeah.
And now the other way around.
I think that is what people must be known for. What have I done?
Yeah.
I might not have succeeded, but what have I tried to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ms. Charles, we're going to tax your brain this morning and...
Let's see if there's anything there.
And we... Oh, Lord. And we consider ourselves students at your feet this morning as we attempt to enlighten, just kind of bring some sort of understanding to the general public. I think it's very, very critical. Maybe, I don't know, because I'm a student of history and maybe many people, that there's always a genesis of something. And normally when things get to a certain point, it's always good to see where it came from. So in terms of the public service to begin with, and older people that may know as a civil service, same thing.
Same thing.
How, in terms of its setup and its construct, the categories of workers, because now we're hearing a lot about contract work, and we have unestablished, established, temporary, whatever. So could you talk us through what that construct is, the origin really of that construct?
We have to remember that we came from the British system, and a lot of our laws are still British, and therefore how our public service has been set up is based on the British system still, in that we still have what we call a Public Service Commission, which is in our constitution and is supposed to guide and direct the public service in the sense that it appoints people. But it appoints people based on a recommendation from the ministries. However, in order to get into the public service, whether under the British or after independence, you have to have a certain amount of subjects. I remember in my time it was 4 subjects including English language, or 3 subjects including English language. English language was always a priority. You had to have the Queen's English. You also, when you were under the British system, remember the public service had to have a certain amount. There was a ceiling. Later on, during the Sir Eric Gairy regime, of course you had a lot of people who never went to secondary schools. Secondary schools was not like now, where almost everybody goes to secondary school, everybody has a chance. So therefore there was not a chance for many people to work in the public service. So Eric created what we call unestablished staff that went out of the authority of the Public Service Commission. Unestablished. So you had established staff and unestablished staff. These unestablished staff also fell under the radar with respect to gratuity and pension. Because they were unestablished, the Public Service Commission knew nothing about them, so how could they get gratuity and pension?
Right, okay.
In Sir Eric Gairy's days, they also were agricultural workers. And he asked some, it was voluntary, that you put aside a certain amount as a sort of pension for your agricultural workers. Some estates never did it, some estates did it. In came the PRG, and they used the Provident Fund to set up the NIS. So that any worker fall under the ambit, established, non-established. Once you contribute towards that fund, then you would get a pension at the end of your working time. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? The PRG wanted to find out now, what do we do with those people who are on the establishment, who are supposedly supposed to contribute towards their gratuity and pension? Because it is assumed that 25% of your salary goes towards your gratuity and pension as a public officer. I never knew that until I was seconded to the union, and then the Ministry of Finance said the union has to contribute 25% of my salary to the government as part of my gratuity and pension. And then the unions would write and say, could you please spare us and let us forfeit that money? And so it was assumed that you were contributing that towards your gratuity and pension. So this is how unestablished staff came about. Then later on, we ended up, in comes the World Bank, the IMF, the Paris Club. These are all the people who lend us money. International lending agencies, as well as the Caribbean Development Bank. And when somebody lends you money, there are terms and conditions to the loan, just like in an ordinary bank or a credit union. And most of them under the conditions would be that you keep your public service at a certain level. You must, based on your population and the services you provide. That's what the economists say. But there would be, what do I say? There is the politics of the situation, the socioeconomics of the situation, and you would agree that there are some jobs that would not be appointed by Public Service Commission, like cleaners and so, you can have 4 subjects including English language to be appointed to be a cleaner or an office attendant. So you end up under the unestablished staff. The vote 340 is...
I was just going to ask about what is vote 340 and why
now,
is it used?
let us look at like us as ordinary folks. When we get our salary at the end of the month, some people like me, I take several envelopes. Electricity in one, number 1. Like telephone, number 2 in another envelope, mark telephone. That in another envelope, rent in another envelope, and so on. So that when you pick it up, you know that is for electricity, this is for that. It is the same thing with government. Vote just means allocation. Just as I put my allocation for electricity in an envelope. They put it under a vote. So it could be vote 10, it could be vote 20, it could be vote whatever. So that if you are working in the public service and you have to find out something about pension, you know to go on the computer and plug in vote whatever.
So it's a cost center. It's kind of like where they put...
It is just where you put it.
Right, okay.
And it is numbered.
Yeah.
Why is it used though?
Huh?
Why is it a tool of, because under the way you described the unestablished workers that came in Sir Eric's time, it sounded like if it was a political decision because the policy in terms of the public service and what they wanted didn't support a certain group or left a certain group behind. So as we have morphed into 40-something years of our existence. Where does the vote 340 thing come in?
But it was both. You will always have political implications and socio-economic implications of hiring someone. So you for example, like contract workers, for example, contracts. You have contracts for many reasons. Mr. Allie might tell you some in the private sector, for example, and the ILO was concerned about that, is that a lot of private sector firms were hiring people under contract. So when you were under a contract, you were not under the auspices of a union. But it did not always mean that was the case. You, in the public service, for example, you could have a contract where there is not an established post. So for example, the Accountant General is an established post within the public sector. Now if you want to hire an advisor to the Accountant General, that is not an established post. So that person will be given a contract. An advisor to the minister is not an established post. So that person will be given a contract. There are different ways to look at contracts. Is it because you want to get rid of unions, like happens in a lot of big firms? Or is it because you do not, in the public service, you do not have an established post? And because you do not have an established post, but you find a need for that service, you end up giving that person a contract. Of course, the world has changed and people have contracts for working at home, where you might work for several companies at home. And therefore, unions have to change to know, how do I deal with contract workers? Is it because somebody is a contract worker that person cannot be unionized? Or is it because the person is working from home? I mean, there's a lot of room for union organization. What about domestic workers? Can they be organized? So you have different categories of workers.
This has always been an issue. As you mentioned, Ambassador, the Public Service Commission exists and it was established in a colonial era, in a different time, a different world.
But we inherited in our constitution
So
in
how
1974.
How relevant is it now, as you describe this changing environment, where governments are expected to operate more as businesses, and we know in the colonial era it was a privileged environment. You talk about having a certain amount of qualifications and all that. is different now, and government has a slightly different role now to play in this modern society.
And I want to add to that question,
Yeah.
Byron, we've talked about the public service rules.
Yeah.
From since 1940 or when it is that it was
Well, rules
established.
and regulations.
Rules and regulation,
Yes, you
and
have
the
the
issue
rules.
is there a need to revise it? Because in Margaret Thatcher days, when she dismantled her public service in England, and it came from, we inherit from England, she dismantled it and changed up a lot of things then, and she had a lot of pushback, but made it more modern and more accessible
'cause
to
it wasn't
being
suited for living.
run, because a lot of the inefficiencies in the public service, you hear PSs complain and talk about they can't discipline, they can't do this, they can't do that, because the rules
The bureaucracy,
are so,
you know,
yes.
it's-
So
look.
what is your take on that?
The Public Service Commission could be a two-edged sword, in that it was also set up to protect public workers from unscrupulous politicians.
Yes,
Right,
correct.
right.
That is the major
So that
objective.
you did not have a lot of political pressure as to who to hire and fire and that kind of a thing. But it has become an unwieldy tool, because when you set up laws, remember, laws take so long to amend. For example, there was a discussion sometime last week about minimum wage. Minimum wage is another one. You set up a minimum wage, it's good, but when are you going to revise it? Because the cost of living goes up, and people are going to say, I'm hiring you on the minimum wage. The minimum wage was 50 years ago, 40, 20, 10. How often are we going to amend our laws? It is good, very, very good to have a minimum wage, but our laws must go in sync
Correct.
with those realities.
Correct.
And the same thing with the Public Service Commission. Is the public service, we need to have a national dialogue on the role of the Public Service Commission. But then it has to be changed with the Constitution, because it is a constitutional arrangement.
Correct.
So we have to have constitutional change, and I've seen what has happened with constitutional change,
Proposed constitution.
proposed constitutional
there,
change,
don't go there.
and how people look at it as a political tool.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you say, let us modernize the Public Service Commission, you're thinking, well, right away, it is a political thing to just maneuver yourself and have an autocracy.
Yeah.
So it is very, but it has to be done, because you cannot have a situation where the same person who goes to a bank to work turns into a different worker than
Absolutely.
the person who comes into a ministry to work.
Yep.
With a PhD.
What is the difference between the bank? It is not necessarily more money, because in
It's the
some
environment.
areas
The
of the
environment.
public service, they get more money than a teller in a bank.
Yeah.
So we have to say, why is it that somebody comes from St. Patrick and comes to the bank in St. George's at 7:30, and somebody who lives next in Tantine comes to the ministry at 9? Is it right? Is it proper? And then does the permanent secretary, who has authority, has responsibility but no authority,
Yes.
to sanction,
Say that again. The permanent secretary
has
has
a
responsibility but no authority. But isn't the isn't the permanent secretary like the manager?
Yes.
So they have responsibility but no authority.
To do what?
So how you treating with people?
That's the point.
Well, that's
Well,
the
you
problem.
have to talk.
But how long you go talk?
Right. And permanent secretaries have said to me, because I was there, and I can say it, and I can attest to it, and I can prove it, and I can defend it, that permanent secretaries are sometimes called before Public Service Commission, and they tell me it looks as though they are the ones who are wrong. When they are questioned, they stop write reports on anybody.
Yeah.
And don't talk for if they're right. Don't talk for if we tell
But then we are small society.
Wow.
I was speaking to a young man, and it brought back what I experienced in the public service. I would not write a report on Mr. Allie, because I know him. He has a wife and 4 children, And I do not want him to lose his job. I do not want to take bread out of his mouth. It's not that Mr. Allie has lost his job on his own free will by not coming to work on time and doing what he has to do. It is because I, this bad, wicked woman, wrote a report on Mr. Allie.
Yeah, nothing to do with Mr. Dialli's performance or lack thereof.
Nothing. Nothing.
What we inherit now, and I keep saying that, and that is one of the things
That's
about
dysfunctional, though.
labor.
But it is.
We need to bring responsibility, because you cannot have, remember, our public service in Grenada is probably the single largest employer.
Of course.
Right?
In most of the Caribbean and in most countries, government is the single largest employer.
And it drives what happens in the country.
Ambassador Charles is so correct. When you leave public service and you come to private sector, I hear Senator Humphrey, I've said it many times, the only difference is the environment, and what in that environment is different is that in the private sector you can lose your work at a whim if you don't follow. So there's this fear that if you don't perform or you don't follow the rules, you could be fired.
But somebody was annoyed with me when I said that as a minister.
That don't exist.
That is the difference.
Yes.
So the person was so annoyed that I said that is the only difference. And then they would say, set up a committee. They need training. They need to be retrained. The government is not training enough, or the private sector is not training enough. And the responsibility comes from the individual to the employer, as though you don't have a responsibility yourself to train yourself.
Well, one of the issue is that, and you touched on this, Ambassador, is that of, and unions from a unionist background also, labor, this question of contract workers. What we observe now is that it's a very projectized environment now that we are living in. A lot of the activities that government carry out come from a project environment, and by its nature, because it has a timeline, focused, contracts are in fact issued, and unions are questioning this as unfair. The issues of job security they're raising there. I mean, how fair is it, and does the union have a just cause to say that contract is something that should not be pursued, and you should look at more permanent employment?
10 years.
Bit of a
10-year versus
10-year
contract.
Contract, yeah.
Well, in a sense, you have to say to someone that I have a responsibility to keep my job. And nobody is going to fire a good worker, generally. So if I know I am a good worker, nobody's going to fire me. As a matter of fact, everywhere I have worked, in every school, when I'm leaving, people are not happy. They feel I should stay. And it's not a boast, it's just something that you make yourself useful. Make yourself useful wherever you are.
You have to be an asset.
I am not doing a favor to the employer. I am working for my money, so why am I giving that impression as though it is a favor? Now we end up with tenure. I have heard that you cannot go to a bank if you are on a contract, that you cannot get a loan if you are on a contract. And that is one of the things that government and the private sector might need to look at.
No, it's being looked at now. I know credit unions and the banks, because the banks themselves, and it all speaks to the issue of outsourcing.
Because
we outsource a number of our activities now in the private sector. That is what is happening. And we're going to come to the digitization issue just now, I want to talk to you about. But the whole issue of outsourcing and contracts associated with outsourcing is, how do you manage credit risk for the loans that we're talking about? Banks will tell you, and financial institutions will say to you, there's no difficulty in you coming to me with a 3-year contract. For what they would want to see is, based on what Ambassador Charles, if you're an excellent worker and you're getting good performance reviews, highly likely your contract will be renewed and continue to be renewed.
And what's your history too?
Right, so banks now, in terms of loans and assessing your ability for risk and so on, will look now not only at your contract, they will look at your performance as well as a worker. And if they figure, well, your performance rating was low, the chances are you getting that contract renewed. And then, so it's a different...
And that's a risk for them.
Right, and it's a different approach now. So the institutions are now looking at it differently instead of just saying, let me just see what your contract says.
Okay.
And it's only for 3 years or whatever the case. So it's a different approach because everybody understands how the system is changing and you need to change with it.
But there's also an equality there's also an equality in length of contracts as well. Because most of the people give contracts for 1 year.
1 year is short.
1 year is short. And 1 year is 1 year puts someone at a great disadvantage. And so I think one of the things, and maybe from where you sit, Senator Allie, is having a discussion of something starting from a 2-year point of view.
2 or 3,
and moving up. That should be like a standard. What does the ILO say about that kind of thing?
The ILO cannot tell an employer how much to give out.
But what's a basic standard?
Because remember, you might have a probationary period.
The standard is 3 years.
3 years is the standard.
Some cut it to 2, but it's 3 years.
Not in Grenada. No standards.
I know within certain projects of the government that we are working on a 3-year basis.
Right, and then
within the government, because a lot of people will tell you it's 2, it's 3, whatever. But if we come across into the private sector, you would find that there's an egregious misuse of contracts.
I wouldn't agree with that, but at the same time, I wouldn't agree about egregious.
You don't know.
No. You see what is happening in the private sector as well.
Of course.
There is outsourcing that people
Think.
There's
no outsourcing. Yes. There's advantage.
No. If I decide I have back office operations, say in a financial institutions or telecommunications,
there are exceptions.
where we have outsourced and has worked. Some have worked very well, some have not.
Right.
But there are, and there will always be the exception to the rule where people will try to take advantage of a system and situation.
My point.
But that's why I said I took umbrage with the word egregious. But generally, when you outsource as a private sector, you're outsourcing
but outsourcing is a
because
different tool, though, and it's a different
but
creature.
it's contract. It's contract.
But
it's a form of contract.
Remember, the private sector has tools that it can use that the public sector is afraid or cannot use. In the sense that I have known people in the private sector where I am working there for 10 years and my salary reaches a certain level. They prefer to sever me and take somebody at a lower level. And then when they reach it, then they sever again and then they go that way and whatnot.
And they pay the price for the severance.
So there is always a way of taking advantage of the worker, and that is where trade unions have come in. If employers used to treat their workers fairly, there would be no need for trade unions. Trade unions came in because workers are treated unfairly and will always be treated unfairly if they don't have any representation.
And balance. There's a balance.
There's something I want to touch on though, because before we move on, and based on something you said earlier, it just went off in my head. We always have this conversation about the implementation rate of the government and so on and so forth. What happens with the government in the government service is driven by the public service. So if we are saying that the manager of departments and ministries, who is the permanent secretary, has responsibility but no authority. So when in terms of, so in the private sector, let's say we plan that we're doing this project, we have timelines, we have deadlines, we have owners, we have status updates, we have all of that. We have plan B, plan A, plan B, whatever. And we're working towards that time and you can't slack. But if you're in the public service and let's say there's something that we're implementing, all right, so that would come from, let's say, the cabinet, who are the policy drivers, and then that goes to the manager. So how are we implementing? How are we working? How we describe it for me? Because I'm seeing something different.
Sometimes it's hit and miss.
Yeah.
And that is why I think that it is fair to say that government has lost a lot of millions of dollars in projects because of this ineptitude. And that doesn't mean that we don't have good public servants. That is why a lot of things are implemented, despite those weaknesses in the system. It could have been worse. But we do have some very, very good public officers who do their job and must be complimented.
That's correct.
But the issue is that everybody falls into one loop, and the good ones get frustrated because they are working for those suckers, and that is one of the problems. For example, I received a document that was a cabinet conclusion in 2019, and I received it this month.
Wow.
Okay, it's a long time.
2021.
Yeah.
That's my point, because
But you see, Brenda, the other aspect that comes
because
into
that's
play.
the thing. So that's why we would have rate of implementation issues if we have situations like that. Meanwhile, in the private sector, you are accountable. I ain't passing a month.
No, and accountable to the point where you can lose your work.
Correct.
So,
Because you are shareholders. Who are the shareholders in the government? The taxpayers. But the taxpayers are not involved. And there is no dividend.
Yeah.
But the shareholders in the private sector know that if you don't perform, Mr. Allie, my dividend will be very small. I invested in systems, and I want to know at the end of the year, I get a proper dividend, a proper profit sharing then.
We
How
call
do
it,
we
we call
fix
it,
that?
We call it deliverables.
but I want
How
to
do
add,
we fix that, though?
I want to
How
add-
do we fix that?
Well, I want to add the other element that Ambassador left out as well. The politics that gets into when a minister has an advisor, most of the times when you talk to ministers on a vote 340 or whatever vote, it's because either the PS or somebody critical to implementing the same policy directives from cabinet is not happening, and they need to get some. Ambassador was there. She could tell you that there sometimes you meet certain PSs and they change PSs because of that same reason. PSs sometimes comes in with certain mindsets and constructs, whether it's politically driven or not, and prevents the minister for that ministry to implement and have implementation done as they would like to see it.
Why
And it's because our size, we're small, and so the politicians themselves are challenged by our own behaviors. And I think, as you say, how could we change that? It has to start with that conversation Ambassador spoke about with the rules and how we need to adjust the rules to reflect what we have in society now.
As we come towards the end of this, though, what comes to my mind, Ambassador, is that given your experience as an employer, but also in labor, when you look at the present industrial impasse in the country, if you were appointed as a moderator, what would be your approach? What do you think is a fair settlement on this matter going forward?
Well, in industrial relations, it is based on good faith. That's one of the main pillars of collective bargaining, good faith. And you cannot buy good faith and share it on the table here. So I cannot come in and say, here is some good faith, here is some good faith, here is some good faith. And that is a great pity. Because whenever you are negotiating, whether private or public sector, it's the same principle. If you are negotiating with Huggins, because I have not heard of any problems in the private sector. The private sector is going through almost the same hazards that the government is going through. And I have not heard, maybe I might be wrong, but I've not heard any industrial,
one
except at the bank RBTT.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is a different thing, where the bank has been sold and you can sell people. So they're saying, okay, I'm working with you, you sever me, and then I decide whether I want to work with Mr. Allie or not.
Worker has a choice under the law.
Which I think is fair.
The difference in this case is there was an obligation by the government, they argue.
You mean in RBTT?
No, in the case of the government.
In the case of the case of the government, they had made an agreement of 4% or whatever. They had made an agreement. So we have an agreement. Just as anybody would have an agreement. The government is saying, based on the COVID situation, the lack of commerce and trade, we are not collecting as much money as we should. And therefore, I am asking you, please, to hold back until the economic situation comes to mind. I remember that happened in Barbados years ago when the government at the day had asked the Barbados Workers Union to put a freeze. Because there was a freeze that was agreed to by the
financial crisis.
By the union. And the union agreed. So it depends. The question exists. Do we have good faith that does the union not believe that there is money? Does the union think that there is money when there is no money? Or is there money and somebody saying there is no money? How do we get to the stage where everybody get to know that there is no money? So that is, or you know there is no money and you're pretending you don't know there is no money. What is the true situation that we are dealing with?
They're also saying that there are prevailing, they're seeing optics of, let's say, the buyback of Grenada, the what's going to happen in terms of the cash that they're going to give to the airport. So they are making all these, we could explain till we die, but that is what they keep advancing. But here you are saying that, you know, you can't do this, but then in perception, you are doing, your behavior is different. So in essence, they are saying, listen, your behavior is not matching that you don't have money. So that, to me, from where I sit, that seems to be the real crux of the issue there. And you're right, how do you get to the good faith point, or to the point where we agree, listen, nothing is really happening, but here's what, I'm going to take care of this here. And how do you get people to accept or, you know, understand that?
Let me say something, and I know I'll get blows for it after I see it.
I will be.
But one of the things,
a nice whipping boy.
Wow. One of the things they don't say is that in January 1, 2020, the 4% was given to all public workers. And then COVID came in March. And no public worker, as far as I know, got a reduction in pay, was sent home. And the government had to take that increase from January 1, 2020 and apply to everybody's salaries for the whole of 2020, with all the revenues that they lost 60% after COVID and so on. Nobody talks about that. And saying that public workers was a privileged group. They were, because everybody else, whether it was in the private sector, tourism industry, retail, trade, all of them, everybody suffered some level of sacrifice, either through loss of pay, loss of jobs, reduction, rotation, whatever it is. And nobody seems to be sensitive and say that. But that is the reality, that is the fact that happened in 2020. Now we're in 2021, and there is a cry for the agreement and the 4% to come and play, and rightfully so, because it was an agreement. The government have never said, based on what I know, that it's not going to be paid.
That's correct.
They have asked for a relief. And Ambassador Charles makes an important point. If we have to mediate this situation, as Byron is asking for, we need to get personalities in there that we could trust information that can say to, because one of the things of industrial relations is information flow. And I must be able to present from one side, the government, this is the facts of the information we have there. If you want to go check it. But this is what we're seeing, and this is why we're asking for what we're asking.
And we have to be open with it.
And that good faith is another word of saying trust. Do we trust what we're going to get, what is going to come to us? And are we willing to make their pronouncements to our constituents that, listen, we have to be patient? And that is where it is. That is where it's at. You have to be able to trust the personalities who will come in a mediation effort and say to you, guys, on this side, this is what it is. Here is why we say this is what we're asking for, and we need your patience, and give you probably dates when we think this could happen, and we could see some sort of relief coming. But you cannot just take the position that this is unreasonable and talk about the traffic lights we want to spend on that perception.
I think Brenda made a point. Has the government actions been consistent with the fact that there is a reduction in revenue and therefore there's austerity?
It's a perception. It's what they're seeing.
You know?
I mean, even though there is the fact that the spending on the traffic lights, on the buyback of Grenada and all of these is a different tool, but you know it doesn't matter. People are what people to them. It's people are saying, okay, so if you can do that,
these things are capital expenditure.
Correct.
And I keep on telling people, you are saying that government got a surplus of 11 million. Okay, so government gives you the 11 million. How will government end up now paying every month?
Because you have to because
you
pay 61 million and that's gone. But then for the 4% is every
month. Right. So I could have a surplus and I could take that surplus and buy a refrigerator. Or I could take that surplus and hire a maid.
So
but could I pay the maid after the surplus is finished?
It seems like you're losing the arguments on all fronts, because
it's
the
not that
arguments are germane, but it's how it's being received. And then we have all the additional stresses.
Sometimes you can block your brain.
That's
Different
correct.
thing blocks your brain.
That's correct.
So if you want to discuss religion, and I believe in Allah and you believe in Buddha, I cannot.
Because we come to the party with different accessories, and sometimes the glasses we put on, they can be different colors. But in just getting to a point, because it's just tying up, I mean, everything that's happening. What is the best situation? What is the best?
Eventually it will go down to the public.
Yes.
Eventually, if I am trying my best to negotiate with you and I'm saying this is what it is, and I cannot make blood out of stone, and you decide I am not going to accept what you say, whatever you say, and I am going to mix up capital and I am going to mix up recurrent expenditure. And every time I come with something, and I'm not saying let us sit down again and do, then it ends up in the public domain. And the public decides.
No, public.
Should we be sitting today? Should I be sitting down again for another
Of
go
course,
around that?
you must. You have to keep talking. You cannot stop talking. That's the only way. As
the rhetoric is
Ambassador Charles will
trust.
say, when it comes to the public will demand that the side sits down and get a solution to the problem. Yeah, that's how it is. You must continue talking. You cannot stop.
So when you went up and you beat up Mr. Blaze,
the thing about it is I was not even in the union at that time, at that level. I only came into the union in 1990.
But you are a leader.
No.
No, but I mean, in terms of that, they saw you as that.
But
I listened to your
was
voice.
not, in that time, no. I was not on the negotiating team. I was not the president of the union or anything like that. The only government that I negotiated with was the Braffett government.
Right.
And I remember when Dr. Carl Mitchell offered me 0%. And I said, 0%, that's not an offer. He said, yes, I'm offering 0, it's an offer.
It's not a reduction.
Yeah.
Colleagues, it's Easter weekend, and I just want to say that we need
Easter
to be
week.
safe,
Yes.
Safe is the
Easter
word,
week,
Holy
Be moderate
week. Yeah.
in everything you do.
And Easter is a time of renewal.
Yeah.
It really is a time of renewal
And we
shedding.
got to renew our thoughts.
And
our relationships.
Absolutely.
And how we
That's
deal,
it.
and
That's
how
it
we
right
deal
there. That
with
part.
each other.
That part.
And what do we do? How do we reflect on our country, where it is going, who is responsible? Is it the politician or is it us? In the end, we are all responsible individually for whither thou goest.
Yeah, that's a great place to end.
I'm going to end by saying I didn't get a chance to ask Ambassador Charles about how digitization is going to affect the way unions operate. But we'll get to that conversation another time.
Because I think it is something we got to look at. Digitalization, globalization, contract work, and so it is going to affect work unions, and they have to reorganize because you cannot use 21st century tools, 14th century tools
in the 21st century world.
Right.
It's the same thing with the public service.
I know we had to end, but
we gotta go.
We will get into that another time.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you so much.
Thank
you for coming.
You're welcome
Appreciate
anytime.
Yes. Gentlemen, happy Easter.
Thank you.
Yes.
Same to
Happy
you, Brenda.
Holy Week.
Thank you.
Trust you find a week for shedding and renewing. Senator Allie, have a good week. I knew you was coming with something. I saw it in your eyes. Thanks everyone for joining us this morning on this special occasion and this special program of Perspectives. We'd like to thank our team and wish them all the best for this holiday week. Of course, we have no program next Monday. It's Easter Monday. If you're heading out to the beaches, the picnic spots, wherever you're going, please keep it safe. You're going out to have a good time. Observe the COVID protocols. No, there's no curfew. Stop the rumors. And let's all move on. Have a great week, everyone. For everyone here, Richie Oliver, Nazim Benjamin, Blondell George, a Curl and Dragon. I am Brenda Baptiste. Oh, Kirk Oliver. Good morning, Kirk. I am Brenda Baptiste. Have a great day.